Okay, well, hello everyone, and it's great to be invited to speak to you today. The title of my presentation is No Room for Artificial Ethics in Artificial Intelligence. So I imagine you've got a pretty good clue what I intend to speak about. So first of all, a little bit of background, if I may, about myself in relation to my pedigree in discussing these issues. As many of you will probably know, I operated as a surveillance camera commissioner for 7 years. And I kept a close and watchful eye on standards in the security industry, ethical, technical, and otherwise. I developed a separate strand of the national surveillance camera strategy that focused on the ethical deployment of new technologies. It was actually led by Professor Peter Fussey. And also during my tenure, I provided evidence at the London Ethics Panel, the Matt Ryder QC biometric review, and then finally at the Court of Appeal in the extremely high profile case involving Mr. Bridges v. the South Wales Police, which was all around the use of facial recognition. But by joining Coresight, which is a leading facial recognition firm, I aim to put my legislative recommendations to the Home Office in practice. And in truth, I want to change perceptions surrounding the software. As part of my role as Chief Privacy Officer, I'm keen to engage with those who are concerned about the technology's use within society so that we can help Coresight AI and industry partners to provide the great value to society that I know that it can. But to do that, we need to go beyond the mixed messaging. So what do I mean by that? Well, one of the essential phrases necessary to understand, in my view, surrounding AI is the phrase ethics washing. We all know what greenwashing is. It's when a company says, look at us, we're the cleanest company on the planet. Well, ethical washing refers to the practice of, in my view, ethical posturing, where organizations falsely claim and give lip service to ethics and then declare it's operating in practice, when in fact, declaration of ethics is mainly for show. It is a problem, especially in the world of facial recognition software, not just because it's inauthentic or sends a mixed message, which it does, but it actually distracts from whether actual steps are being taken towards a world where professional standards demand AI that works for everyone, including historically marginalized groups, eradicating bias, being explainable to humans, etc. What happens is it emerges and emanates from a series of missteps or a lack of willingness to tackle ethical challenges in a real way. Since it's largely for show and veneer deep, such policies are artificial at best and hypocritical at worst. The problem for companies engaged in such practices is they come to realize way too late that there is reputational risk. It damages the trust of its employees, it has exposure in the national media, or there's simply a lack of confidence among purchasers. So ethics washing is damaging. For the purpose of this discussion, I'll explain in my view what ethics is. It's simply about doing the right thing. So for us, building AI software that is honest, compliant with laws and regulation, it's important that it enables transparency, that we can provide guidance to ensure that the human, the operator, is actually in control of the system. And all of this combines to make sure that you can use this software as a force for good, not to dehumanize, not to victimize, and not to oppress. So ethics is not just simply a vehicle to circumvent regulation, because without the commitment to the behavior from the highest levels of the organization, these policies will continue to be mainly for public consumption and don't infiltrate all decision-making right across the company that develops the software as it should. It's absolutely fundamental. So in my view, these conflicts of interest require a guidance framework, but this is proving to be a great challenge. There's a huge battle at the moment between policymakers who are trying to develop those frameworks for users to operate within an AI, an ethical framework, and those developers that are straining every sinew to demonstrate their ethical approach to AI works well, or at least they try and do that. But as you can probably gather, I'm somewhat cynical about that. And the question that I would ask if I were you is, well, why should I care? Well, it's a big question, in my view, with a very simple answer. You care because your organization will not be exposed to breaking international law or creating bad publicity due to poor ethical standards. It hits the bottom line. So there you go. That's honest and transparent, I think, from me. And that is the beginning of an ethical approach to developing your software. So what else underpins this problem? Well, world rules underpin this problem. In a global economy, we need to track rules, regulations, and laws across the world so that we can understand the different issues that are emerging. So I'm going to give you a very quick tour de force of what's going on. Take the United Kingdom, just released its national AI strategy, and it's supported by a new data regime. Before you go to sleep, I'm going to hit the high levels, which I hope will indicate why these issues are important. The government has consulted on far-reach proposals in relation to the GDPR restrictions. It's looking at removing DPIA, data protection impact assessment requirements. It's looking at amending to training data regulations for AI, removing some independent from the Information Commissioner's office to enable the government to steer the agenda more clearly. This is big stuff, seismic change. And I would argue that if you're in this business, you need to be tracking that very closely because it underpins your approach to operating in an ethical, open, transparent manner. UK has left the European Union, as we all know. Well, Europe is moving fast tracks towards developing what they call the Artificial Intelligence Act. They've released a draft. Now, these issues are quite significant. They will place facial recognition in a high-risk category. They're looking at harmonizing regulation that will be much more stringent. But by the time it comes into play, and I reckon that's 18 months to 2 years, I think the industry will have neutered the arguments concerning inherent bias and ensured all software is secure by design and secure by default. So their evolution moves rapidly, far quicker than laws can keep up with. I've been in regulation and oversight for many years, and it's not clear to me how either of the frameworks I've just discussed are actually meant to operate, let alone be overseen or scrutinized. So more of that later. Further afield, we see the United States. Now they're struggling to develop a federal approach to the technology. However, in 2021, we saw 6 states actually introduce some privacy bills, and we saw 22 bills get stuck in committee. The only saving grace is that the GDPR is being seen as a common denominator in most places. Now, this is at least significant and helpful for developers because they know the toughest standards to develop to. Now, not to be done by the West, now get this, new privacy legislation is emerging not just in India, Thailand and beyond, but in China. And China have stated their declaration that by 2035, they want to lay out a blueprint for leading global standards for emerging technologies. Now, many of you may see some counterintuitive signals here. A country using technology to suppress millions of Uyghur Muslims through technology, a country that is building a surveillance state where social scoring informs a state. Not sure about that. It feels a little bit like an ethics laundrette. And this is the pool we're operating in. These are the decisions corporate CEOs have to make decisions around. Who do we use? Who do we trust? What will damage our reputation? So these are key issues. Just want to touch very briefly on standards. I work very closely with the British Standards Institute, and we're looking at standards that will support AI. We're looking at advising the government. We're looking at harmonizing not just across the EU, but I personally believe beyond to our American colleagues and probably many others. But how is the developer and the purchaser to respond to what is actually a fractured picture? I'll leave that as a rhetorical question. I just want to touch about facial recognition being used as a force for good. Within that context, it means the ability of an organization to weave equality, integrity, privacy, and security as golden threads, fundamentally and indelibly throughout every aspect of concept, design, build, and operation. In the context of biometric capabilities, facial recognition has commanded more media column inches and debate than any other modalities. But it's a little curious that countries can use the technology to protect its borders from hundreds of thousands of people coming in a day, yet we struggle to use it internally for areas that can clearly operate as a force for good. So let's get to the nub of the matter. The increasing trend of developers to say that their product is ethically underpinned. There's an undeniable strain in this assertion because commercial imperative sometimes makes that hugely difficult. Let me give you a recent example. The Federal Trade Commission found a facial recognition company guilty of harvesting billions of photographs to train its data, its AI. And it forced that company to remove billions of photographs and actually damaged the reputation of that company. So yet the NIST that was involved in scoring its competitors was still enabled to give that company a score. Now, that appeared to me a little bit unethical. I'm not blaming NIST, but I'm just saying actually when you use processes that are not acceptable and are actually challenged by an august body like the Federal Trade Commission in America, I'm not entirely certain that those companies should be getting a score and being competing in the market. That's my personal view. One could ask, is it ethical for developers to develop their software that's not secure by default and secure by design? Well, clearly it's not. If the data subject's privacy isn't secure, how can you say that we're open, honest, and trustworthy? And if I had £1 for every company that said we are GDPR compliant, I'd be very wealthy. But that actually doesn't mean anything. It's the operator and controller that has to be GDPR compliant, and they need software that can contract and expand to match GDPR. So just be very careful. And one final comment is, if you're dealing with a software company, do they put the human at the center of their operation? Because in explainable AI, which is an ethical concept, they must do. At Coresight, we do, but I'm not sure that every company does that, and it's always worth checking. So I've outlined how regional, national, and international laws may impact on legality of use. And to build a software system that has sufficient flexibility with its solution takes not just technical skills in developing the software, but a deep understanding of surveillance and regulation. How else can a developer anticipate the requirement of an operational police commander or an intelligence agency or a commercial retail outlet in configuring their algorithm to support them? You can't just produce an off-the-shelf system. It doesn't work like that. So you do need that harmony between the technical experts, the surveillance experts, and, in my view, regulatory expertise. So I just want to touch on 3 facts, because I think the debate around this software has been frozen in time for at least the last 10 years, where civil liberty groups will say the sky is falling in, it's very bad. But let's have a look at the facts. The use of this software is due to grow exponentially to the tune of billions and billions of dollars over the next 3 to 5 years. There is no doubt about that. The second fact is that it's yielding huge benefits to society. There was an Interpol report recently that mentioned that 1,500 terrorists, senior criminals, and fugitives have been identified by this software. That, ladies and gentlemen, is a force for good, whatever people say to deny and denigrate. And also, there is a significant degree of public support for the software when it is used in a way that is supported by the public. There was a report done by Sean Cooperman Research and also by the Ada Lovelace organisation in the UK. And essentially, if the software is used to target high levels of criminality or to support extremely vulnerable people in society, there is a very high level of support. And you're looking between 70 and 80% across both respective surveys. So my argument is really to challenge the contesting arguments. And I think it's an ethical posture, because I actually hold the view that completely naysaying the software without recognizing how the software can be used is actually counterproductive. Allow me, please, just to talk about Coresight, because as a Chief Privacy Officer, it's the only company I've worked for and understand in depth. We produce technology with privacy, security, and data protection by design and by default at its core. and we codify it, and we can explain to any client or partner how we do that. It provides reassurance and is an ethical posture. We put global standards at the heart of what we do to infill secure by design, ISO 30137, secure by default certification, cyber essential certification. It's really important, because if we can't look after ourselves, how can we look after you? We have a solid pedigree in lawful and ethical obligations associated with the use of our software. And I provide advice and guidance to partners around how to use our technology, because it can be complex in complex use cases. We extend our due diligence obligations, producing AI as a force for good in fostering those relationships with our customers. And our relationship with the client base can help their own assurance and due diligence processes if they're acting as an integrator. And then finally, explainable AI. We are developing a human-in-the-loop manual that explains how to use the technology in simple terms, written by a regulator, but written for those people who are looking to use our software and our technology. CoreSight is a fairly new company. I'm delighted to say that we've achieved top ranking in the NIST 2021 category for visa border and wild track tests. Is accuracy important? Well, yes, it is. It's a key component of data processing, and it's an absolute essential ingredient of our offering. We were in the top ranking in the 2020 biometric rally, covered by the US Department of Homeland Security. Again, accuracy and integrity. Our ability to capture faces at oblique angles, 90 degrees from above and masked, I think is unsurpassed. And again, this is extremely important because most cameras are elevated high. What use is it if the software only works when it's at head height right in front of you? Our technology is capable of delivering that kind of high grade response. So personally, and I would say this, I think we're as good as it gets. I do want to provide a very strong counter narrative to the civil liberty groups that the sky is falling in. Software such as CoreSight is and can be used in protection of critical national infrastructure, our petroleum development sites, nuclear sites, where actually security, authorized lists is extremely important. Safeguarding missing children, vulnerable people. If we can save one person, provided we use our software ethically, that's got to be a good thing. Emergencies, high-risk spontaneous incidents. I've mentioned the Ada Lovelace and the other review and research. The public support that use. So I think I've given you a pretty good insight into ethics. I think I've given you a pretty good insight how to CoreSight not just complies, but walks the walk and talks the talk. The route now is to follow and to make sure our increasingly diverse communities, our populations are safe from the harm of disproportionate, unethical, unfair, and unlawful intrusion into their lives, and one which avoids sleepwalking into dystopia. I genuinely believe that an ethical approach, such as trust and confidence, fair and lawful use of our software, being open and honest about what you're doing and how you're doing it, making sure you follow the trustworthy AI principles, that it's explainable, all of this combined will drive up your standards. I sincerely hope you enjoyed this chat. I hope that it's triggered some thought amongst those of you who are in the development world, or indeed partners or integrators, that actually has triggered a thought around, actually, this is something we need to do a little bit more work on. I remain available to speak to anybody that needs a chat, and you can find the details on the slide and so on and so forth. Great to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed.